CannaBiz Conversations. It is the season finale, and whew, has this season flown by. It has been so much damn fun. The future of it, I mean, we're going to keep doing it for sure. So send us people you think should be on our show and that people we need to hear their stories from for sure. We are going to keep doing it. We are excited. We're having fun. But today for me is a personal kind of the reason this individual was chosen for the finale is because since I really started to track the cannabis scene on LinkedIn in the last few years, this individual has stood out as someone that I just love to follow. I love to hear from. I love to, and sure, maybe it's a Grateful Dead connection, or maybe it's, a love of cannabis, or maybe it's all of it. I don't know. And frankly, I don't really care. I'm just glad that we've made the connection today. And before I get into the guest, as always, remember on the season, we have sponsors who we are eternally grateful for. And today, the king himself, Daniel Solomon, King Solomon Nutrients. Look, guys, I don't care if you're growing hydro, if you're growing outdoor, if you're growing indoor soil. This guy gets it, okay? If you've ever followed him on LinkedIn, you see where he goes. You see the grows he has access to. The knowledge runs deeper than you could imagine. So what I tell people all the time is not only is he really smart, but he devised a system that's super low cost. So two-part system, great results. If you don't know Daniel Solomon, go check him out. His website is ksolomonag.com. All right, let's get into the finale today. Without further ado, I will give you Daniel Crawford. Daniel, how are you, man?
I am wonderful. How about yourself, brother?
Gosh, I mean, just to hear you say that makes me feel wonderful. So I'm already great. I'm already jazzed up about today. As I was joking with you in the pre-show, our show here will go live a day before Halloween, a day after an election. So hopefully everyone did both their parts on both those days to do what needs to be done. So Daniel, on the show, as you know, we like to kick things off with an origin story. And I get a sneaking suspicion yours is going to be entertaining. So why don't you let us know, Daniel, where did it all start with you and this beautiful plant?
Yeah, definitely, brother. Yeah, so my journey with cannabis is one that started like many. You mentioned I am a Deadhead, and so music and gathering with friends was kind of how I was introduced to cannabis. I'd go to shows. Fish was on hiatus, and there was a local jam band called the Big Woo out of Minneapolis.
Yeah.
And me and my buddies, we played in a soccer tournament. We hopped in the car and drove like an hour to the show. And one of my buddies had some herb, and we smoked a little bit. I only needed a hit or two, and I was, set straight for the whole evening. So it was kind of a bunch of years like that. I went up to college in Winona State, where I started studying biology. And now I grew up on my grandparents' hobby farm, so I always kind of had a green thumb. I would guess I was my grandma's little garden boy. Taught me everything that I needed to know about gardening, organic farming, before there wasn't even a term organic. So fast forward to college, I was consuming a bit in college, and I didn't have a lot of money. And so naturally I thought, I can grow this stuff. And it just so happened to be married up with the time I was studying biology and learning about a lot of things with plant nutrients and soil health and things like that. And so it all kind of came together really well. And my brother-in-law, first time I ever smelt fresh flower, I went over to his house for the first time, and it was that familiar smell, but something new. And he took me down to his basement. And this would have been about the fall of 2003. He took me down to his basement, and he had a nice little hydro setup with some blueberry plants growing. And he ended up giving me a home-built 800-watt HPS hood. Had some glass panes made out of wood, lined with Mylar, air-cooled, but it got the job done. And so he brought me down one cut of Northern Lights. And from there, started my growing journey, and spent a few years down there in southern Minnesota, growing, supplying my friends, family. And it was right about the same time my wife started to get, who was then my girlfriend, she was sick with some stuff. We didn't know what it was, but she had some GI issues. Ended up being diagnosed with ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease. And cannabis was really the only thing that helped her have an appetite and kind of get through some of the really nauseous periods that she would have. And so, my journey kind of changed from one of, going to music and socializing with friends a lot to providing real medicine for my family and loved ones. So it was kind of this mix of fun and science and adventure, kind of being in southern Minnesota, was a little risque, but it was also hard to get my hands on any strains that had names or of any decent quality. So, sometimes you just got to take the bull by the horns.
Yeah, that's funny. I mean, there's a couple of things here. First of all, I did not know you were a Midwest kid like that. I mean, I knew that you and I have talked before, so I knew you had some family locally here in my prohibition state of Wisconsin. But I did not know that you were a Minnesota kid. I love that. I absolutely love that. And I love the fact that your journey sort of, it takes you the natural way, right? Through the music. The fish hiatus is hilarious to me because not a fish fan, but had a lot of friends that were. And we at the time, we were friends. We were all big into string cheese. And so we were down at a show at UIC in Chicago, and we were like, yeah, we'll get there whenever, no big deal. And about 2 hours before the show, someone basically calls me like, dude, fish on hiatus? I'm like, what do I care? They're like, that show's going to be a madhouse. And wouldn't you know it, man, that show was a damn madhouse. Everyone was there, from tweakers to the real ones, and I'm just like, no, what happened? Like, why did fish go on hiatus? So that's hilarious that's where that goes. I love the full circle. Again, my wife and I, we met in 2003. And I'm married to her. Here I am, 21 years later, similar to yourself. And we were dating then as well. And I met her because I was the legacy distributor in town, right? And her boyfriend was friends with my brother, and everyone knew that's where to find it. So that's how I met her, right? And so I love how this plant has a way, without anyone really knowing or feeling it or seeing it, just sort of, bringing you and gathering you. That special smell, right, of walking in. When my wife and I became caregivers, we were doing it similar, right? I didn't have a great rig setup, all right? I definitely did not have a green setup. I had some gigantic, 800 hoods. I mean, it was not efficient. So don't DM me. This was like 2007, all right? Give me a break, all right? So we were just doing it so we could see it, right? We could go after it. And Daniel, when you get in the room, man, I worked 12, 14-hour days at a dealership, and the only thing that got me through that day was to come home to my garden and just sit there for 2 hours, trim a plant, look at this, smell something, check a water, whatever it was. I just didn't give a shit. I just wanted to be in there. My cats wanted to be in there. My dogs wanted to be in there. Everyone wanted to be in those rooms to do these things. And the smell, it permeated our house. Like, granted, we had a pretty big house, but it didn't matter, because if you have 5 plants, or in our case, because my wife, like you, she has a green thumb. So my buddy, Daniel, tell me if this is fair. He tells me, hey, when you clone, just expect a 50%, death rate. This was back in 05, 06, right?
They'll have a nice overage.
Okay. She's got like a 5% kill rate, and she can't kill a plant. So as soon as she gets it, I've got permits for 100 plants. I look down, extrapolate the math. I'm like, babe, you got me at like 130 here. She's like, I don't know what to tell you. I can't kill a plant. If I expect 50 to die, then I'm going to just keep cutting 100. And I'm like, no, I can't keep up with the velocity, right? But it was magical. It was magical. And I will say the whole process was just so cool and fun to be a part of. And it's what I hate about living in a prohibition state. And people are like, well, just go grow. Guys, I got way too much in the real world to risk my having a problem in what I consider, the last state to ever legalize will be this one. So I don't need the headache, but thank you all for the inbox and how I can get around it and the way I can do it. It's really cool, but I'm not going to do that. But Daniel, when you started to change and get into the medical side, and you talk about the names, and I love it, right? Before, I was just telling this to someone. It was basically like, when we grew up, it was swag or dank. Okay, those were the names. Those were the choices. It was beanie or not beanie. You have if you've got an extra $5, you can get one of the other. Then there was names. Then there was the same names, right? And then when I was in the Colorado scene, dude, the name game was all that mattered, bro. You could walk into a dispensary, and if you just had a seed, you didn't know what it was called. If you could get creative, you could move that down the road. That's the part I've never liked about the naming conventions is that, we just sort of have them. But you, as a grower, when you get your hands on this Northern Lights and you start to cut it and you start to really develop it, what's that process? What was that like for you to start playing with the science? And what, to the extent of a Bible, or what were you using? Guys, I know you're going to find this crazy, but this was slightly before Google was so brilliant. So we were having to find different sources to find our info.
That's funny. On YouTube, there was a guy he was like Mr. Green Man or something. And the dude would wear an entire green, like alien suit and paint his face green. And he'd go around and he'd, show you very as best he could all the different aspects of growing, but he still had to have this fake identity. There's some like British, UK, like knockoffs online. But yeah, in the early days, man, I was up in Winona, and so Barnes & Noble was down in La Crosse, Wisconsin. So that was a 30-minute cruise downriver.
Yep.
So we load up a few bowls, me and my wife, we go down to Barnes & Noble. I post up with my High Times magazines, and whenever there was an article that I needed to kind of complete what I was doing in my grow room, that was the one edition I would buy. And, eventually I had, my 10, 15, 20 of them that were, the reference High Times. And then George Cervantes and Ed Rosenthal, both of them. I had the Grow Bible by who was that? George? Did George write that one, or was that Ed?
This grower one here this is Greg Green. According to this one,
I think I had George Cervantes.
But this is the second edition, so I'm not, you know what I mean? Like, and I got this in I think we bought that in 07 when we started, just because again, I mean, there wasn't like. I had a friend who was a grower, and he was like, bro, if you want to do this, here's what you're going to need. Here's the rigs. Here's the cost. Here's how you start. We were like, okay. And my wife, she's had a green thumb. She digs it. And, but it was funny. Even then in medical, we would still have to go to the nursery or wherever we were getting product and talk about growing tomatoes. It was so dumb. It was the worst. But now we just laugh about it because now when we go in, all we can grow is tomatoes. So we're really just asking about tomatoes. And we'll get looks from people who are like,
It's tomatoes, right?
We're trying to grow tomatoes. So you're learning on the fly. You're going through this process because I've done it, right? So I want to hear about where. So I get about halfway through, right? I switch rooms. I go to flower, right? I'm like, okay, here we go. This is our first flower set. Here's what we're gonna learn. And someone recommends a magnifying glass type deal, right? To tricone, really test and make sure the colors, that the haze, right? And me, I'm OCD, man. So someone tells me something like that, I'm just like, okay. And my wife comes in, and I'm like, hello, I'm like, what do you need, And it was crazy. How did you what was it like for you going through that process? And I want to get to cutting at the very end. So talk to me about up into that portion.
Yeah, definitely. So he brought me down this one plant, and so I knew right away, I could grow it out. I was going to take some cuts, sort of the same situation. I wasn't really 100% sure on how to do it. Found as many videos as I could, how to take clones and things like that. And basically I was planning the same thing, losing a bunch of, maybe if one survives, that'd be amazing. But every single one survived. And so and I just did it straight, I let them root, and then I flowered my first batch. So they're all single colas. They were about a foot tall. And it was the most glorious thing I'd ever done in my life at that point.
What a great idea, by the way, starting off small. Me, I'm just like, I got 4 footers. I got to move into the next room because someone said never get too high to be in this room, So I definitely, great advice for you first-time growers.
And I guess the first grow I had, it actually wasn't the basement one with the 800. I had just a single, probably like 200-watt tube, and I grew under this staircase that my neighbors would use to go up to their apartment. And I can guarantee you their apartment had to smell worse than mine.
had to.
No, I don't know how they didn't say anything. They must have been consumers themselves, because that house reeked, man.
They had to have done. We always thought like we always thought with the exhaust fan that blew out of the room, right? At our house, we're in a gated community in Colorado with a vent coming out one of our side windows, but there was a vacant lot, and then the other house was down the way. And my wife's like, they don't smell that. I'm like, bullshit. This thing vents all day, 87 plants in this room. There is no way that no one downwind, or frankly, this whole neighborhood. But as consumers, I don't notice, right? Like, it takes my buddies who don't consume for me to walk in a room and them go, fuck, man, like, take it easy. Where I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I don't get it.
I haven't even smoked today.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I'm not even, it's only 9 a.m. I have no, whatever. So, all right. So we've got the original under the stairs grow, little Harry Potter grow going on over here, where everyone knows about it. You're in the basement grow. You have a survival rate of 100%. Basically, what now? Well, no, you told us what now. So you call it, you went small, you got him in, you grew it. Okay.
Yeah, eventually started growing up some, moved up to the gallon-sized pots, grown the plants up to about 1.5 feet, 2 feet tall, because I got a nice little bit of space to work with down there in the basement. But again, I've got the same problem as your wife does. I can't kill a single plant ever. Yeah. And any plant is illegal in Minnesota. And so at one point, I think I had like 3 or 4 different strains at this time. And I looked around, I had 3 moms. I was taking cuts off them. I was vegging some out. I had some down in the flower room. And I started to realize it's like this last round, the moms were starting to get big. And I took like 50 cuts off of each plant. And so I started counting, like, oh my God, I have over 200 plants here. Like, so at that point I started to teach my friends how to do this stuff, because I realized like this is way bigger than me.
You got to scale out of your basement into other people's basements.
Yeah, and the smell was getting out of control, and I'm like, all right, so my plan, had I more time and my friends could keep their mouths shut and things like that, my plan was to shut down the grow and pawn that part off on all the friends. And I was just going to have a perpetual veg and distribute cuts to all my friends, give them nutrient plans, and just be like, follow this. I'll give you what you need. You just give me what I need. And
you're the guy. You're the guy that brings the plant all the way there and is like, cool. You deal with the rest of it, and make sure I get what comes off of it.
Yeah, here's your nutrients, and here's
that's a sick model. But again, dude, come on, that's plug and play, right? That's what people go. That's what people go to the local, grow shop right now and buy house plants. I mean, again, my wife has just taken her love of cannabis and put it into house plants. And she cuts them, and the same thing happens. They all survive. So I went from, 1 rubber plant to 17 of them, because just every time. So it's something that happens with the plants. But I think there's something that I want to make clear to people, that the two of you are really grounded souls. Okay. You're people who have an idea of the world around you, right? I call it her woo-woo, but this idea that there's a deeper connection between you and the things around you. And I've always noticed that about you. I've married her, and I know that about her. But so I think there's something about I think the plants know, dude. I know that sounds super weird to say, and people are going to be like, what is wrong with this guy? But I think they know when they're under the care of people who give a shit. So keep it up, man.
I mean, and back in college, man, I had the time was something I had. And so I'd go to a class, and then I'd come back to the garden, and, I could inspect every leaf, turn it over. I knew every nook and cranny of each plant I had, because I would sit down there and tend to them every waking minute. And so they got all the love they needed, and they reciprocated.
Yeah, that's for sure. And that is what they do. So we have plants, we have everything growing. Talk to me about your first trimming session of scale, if you actually made it, like what that first one was like. Because I will say, from my own experience, none of my friends came back for the second trimming. I don't know if it's something I did wrong or what happened.
And there's a reason why I take pity on all the people who are the hourly employees in this industry. who have to trim, package, do all these manual tasks that are, I mean, they destroy your hands, your wrists, your back. But
once again, consumers, I don't think you get that. So those of you watching this show and you see your pre-rolls, you see your packaging, when I was talking with the folks at Sorting Robotics, they made it clear to me that this robot takes the place of like 18 people who are doing ridiculously back-breaking, finger-breaking, bent over, dipping things manually. I think everyone, the joke, weed doesn't grow on trees. Well, it does, but in order to make it what you see, there's a fuck ton of effort that goes into that. And I think people take it for granted. I know that's why my friends never came back. They left with ounces of weed. That wasn't the problem. The problem was the work that goes into actually having to give a shit to do it, in a craft way, if you will. I know there's robots now and there's other things that, can trim off. And I live in Wisconsin. I see agricultural, ideas at its best. But still, Daniel, great call out, man. Thank you to everyone in the industry who's over here rolling and crushing and trimming and doing that work, because without you, it's just a bunch of plants, man. That's the truth of that.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Well, wow. Shoot, where was that?
So we got you're trimming. Tell me about your first trimming at scale.
So there were again, the only person who really knew I grew was my girlfriend, now my wife, back in college. I had 2 friends that I would let babysit my plants. And there was maybe eventually 2 more that got to be in the trimming circle. But of those, about 5 people, they were kind of the go-to whenever we'd have a harvest. And I'm not talking massive. I'm talking, 20, 30 plants, so enough to spend an afternoon together trimming.
I was gonna say, that to me is still massive. 20 at a time is still a lot for 2 or 3 people to take on. If that's not something you've done before, it was a pretty. I mean, it kind of looked you down. You were like, wait, what am I gonna do right now?
So, and I think this was like 2005. So it was even before the med. All my buddies moved out to Colorado as soon as it went med. So like, they got a little bit of their experience from coming over to Crawdad's house and helping me out.
I like that. And I think it's funny because, when we got to Colorado 2004, my wife and I, and it was not really a discussion. It was crazy. It had been in the books. I want to say it was on the books in 2000 or 01. Like, medical had already been there, but it was sort of dormant. It wasn't really a big thing. And then all of a sudden, I think our generation, right, the early 40s, were like, wait, what did you just say? And wait, okay. And then I went to one of these doctors, right, with my migraine. I mean, this couldn't have been more than 17 seconds. I sit down. He, in a thick Russian accent, says, "You have headaches?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Great." And I walked out the other door with a permit downstairs to his dispensary and used a credit card to buy weed. I don't know what else to tell you. It was some of the wildest shit I've ever been through, but I'm an evangelist, right? So when I left there, everyone I know, I'm like, dude, go see this guy, tear it off. Nope, go see this guy. And it was, then the scene exploded. It was crazy, dude. It was wild, but we all had to learn it from somewhere, right? Yeah. This had to be a legacy guy somewhere. And for you in the Minnesota era.
Oh yeah. I have my brother-in-law. And so that's what I tell actually my buddies in college. I'm like, dude, this isn't just some stuff that's people are talking about. Like, so you got to understand, like, this knowledge has been passed down from person to person to gain this. And so, I always have that respect because I know how to grow plants, but again, like, to be able to do what I did, I couldn't have done it without my brother-in-law being there to be like, here's this setup, here's what I do, make some tweaks and take it your own way. And so it's like, yeah, we just kind of share that knowledge and, and that's why I think, when I started posting on LinkedIn and stuff, that's what I want to do, is just share knowledge. I understood that even though people might take that and I might not be able to use it for my advantage because I have this knowledge they don't, I don't want anybody to experience growing bad products. So it's like, I'm all about quality. I'm all about continuous improvement. So by sharing that knowledge information, it betters everybody.
And that's
so
what I think people don't really understand about this ongoing argument with legacy versus how they're going to get into the market, whether it's rec or medical. Where is legacy's place? I believe legacy will always have a place in what we do if we're trying to do it the right way, because we have to consider those who were doing it and putting their lives at risk. You know, whether it's the Emerald Triangle, whether it's in the Midwest with some of the grows in Wisconsin, you know, underground, Minnesota, etc. These things that were going on, these guys were at scale. They were doing something that was going to get them shut down. And when I talk about the medical scene, man, I mean, we were dealing with the DEA. I was in a fucking dispensary. It was terrifying. It was terrifying where you were just like, what is happening right now? And we were basically pulling out and they were pulling in, and they crushed it all. They crushed it all. We had just been out of there and we had just left and to tour it, and it was over in a matter of minutes. And it was over, you know, overzealous anger, whatever you want to call it, but it's about education. And I think as consumers right now, Daniel, and that's why I need more of you. That's why I need you back on LinkedIn, because I need consumers to be hearing about, hey, this is what this means, or this is where this goes, right? Because there's so much, again, prohibition market I live in, THCA, V, this, that, right? If one more person in Wisconsin tells me to go check out a new dispensary, I'm going to snap, okay? I'm going to snap, because it's in a way, everyone's like, oh, but it's moving us forward. I disagree. I wholeheartily disagree with that being some sort of step forward.
My little bro lives over in West Dallas, so he lives in Wisconsin, and he came up I was home for the summer, and he goes, yeah, I had to go in this place, and they were telling me that they could sell me some weed that got me high, and he's like, I cussed him out for about 15 minutes and told him about my brother and what he does and stuff, and I'm like, well, dude, the THCA, it might actually get you high, but I mean, it's not going to be the quality that we're looking for.
And I think that's the thing. I've gone down this road. I've tried to be open-minded. I've got friends that have been in the hemp business for a long time, and they've sent me product. It just gives me a headache. I feel like shit. I don't know what to tell people. And it's the same thing about the beverages. Like, again, you didn't buy a THC beverage at a gas station, or maybe you did. But the point is you don't know, and I don't know. And it's because of a lack of understanding and regulation. I know no one likes the word regulation, but people, if the FDA didn't exist, I don't know that I'd be going out grabbing meals. I'm just being honest with you here. If OSHA didn't exist, I don't know if I'd be going to restaurants. So there's just shit in the world that exists because it has to, and I hate that. But I want to ask you one question before we get into prepping the second half, because it's a big one, and I asked it throughout my time at conferences this year. I say to you, reschedule. You say what?
I say, get rid of it. I don't think it needs to be. I think you
say deschedule, right? That's the obvious ultimate answer.
Yeah, we don't need it rescheduled. It's a plant that people should have free access to. Yeah,
I agree with you. I think we should. I think it is the ultimate goal. I don't know if progress has to make a stop at a reschedule before it gets there, Daniel, or if it just stays there forever. I truly don't know. I'm not this is as political as I get right now. And that's just in my own life. And your little brother and your family can tell you what it's like to live in this state the way it is right now, as you lead up to an election in a state that is literally 50-50. And as nasty as all that stuff gets, I just, the one thing we should all be able to agree on is this plant is good for everybody. And maybe not for everybody in that way, but there are pieces and parts of this plant good for everybody. Daniel, you've told us an amazing story about how you got here. What can we expect to talk about in the second half?
Yeah, definitely. So you may or may not have noticed, but I haven't been on LinkedIn for quite some time here.
Yes.
Going on about 10 months.
The loneliest 10 months of my life. So if that's what you want to talk about, then we are about to get into something that I hope breaks LinkedIn. And I hope it has to recover and come back. And I hope it has to explain for itself how all of us have been deprived, this wonderful man, of his knowledge, his smiling. It's ridiculous. All right, Daniel, we're going to talk about it, bro. Thank you guys so much for joining the first half. It's always a great story. This one was no different. I did not expect the Minnesota. I did not expect the cultivation. That was awesome, Daniel. Thank you so much, man. I look forward to the second half. As always, thank you to King Solomon Nutrients, Damian Solomon, growing some of the best grass there is happening. And you know what it is about him, man, is he actually gives a shit. And he's not only a grower, but he's also a consumer of the product. So he has serious opinions that can be backed up with my favorite, science. I know it's crazy, but science is a big one. Hydro, soil, doesn't matter. You'll get the best results. Check out ksolomonag.com. Thanks a lot, everybody. We'll see you for part 2. Have a great week.